Hi, I'm Chef Catherine coming to you from the Growing Chefs Ontario classroom kitchen, and I'm going to teach you how to make one of my very favorite types of soup today, chicken and wild rice. Wild rice is actually a Canadian ingredient, and it is not a rice at all, but the seed of an aquatic grass. It's been grown and used by Indigenous people in Canada for thousands of years. It's referred to as monomen, and it is so delicious. It is nutty and adds so much amazing flavor. So make sure you find great wild rice. Don't look for any substitutions. Before we get started, make sure you've read through the recipe and washed your hands. This recipe has a lot of different parts to it and it's a bit advanced, so why not try to enlist some friends or family to help you with some of the prep along the way. What I'm going to start with is poaching my chicken. Poaching is a method of cooking where you will gently boil something in a warm liquid. So here I have some chicken stock that we made already. I'm going to put my raw chicken breast into the stock here, and I'm just going to turn it on to a low simmer. And then this will cook for about 20 to 25 minutes until the chicken breast is fully cooked through. I just washed my hands because I was handling that raw chicken, and now I'm going to start into my vegetable preparation for the soup. When I'm preparing the vegetables, I want to think about making them very consistent in size. That way they will cook evenly in the soup. When I cut my vegetables, I first will start by breaking them down into about finger-sized pieces, and then from there, I like to think of them being about the same size as my fingernail, which is about a centimeter cube. I'm going to start by preparing our celery. I have a compost bowl here for my scraps. I will start by cutting off all of the root ends and then just lining them up to cut off all the tips. And this can go for compost or for maybe making a vegetable stock. And then I'm just gonna go, like I said, break it down into finger-sized pieces and cut them in half. Now that everything is nice and even, I can easily dice my celery. So this is the size I'm looking for. I'll just keep making sure that I'm cutting it consistently. So when I finish with one ingredient, I'm just gonna pick it up and I'm going to put it into a bowl here. I need to keep all of my ingredients separate so that when I'm cooking them, I can add them in a different order if I need to. So now I'm going to peel my carrots. I need to have about 1.5 cups of carrot diced. So we'll start with one and see how much that gets me. I'll cut off the root and the tip here just to start, and make sure I'm cutting it into those finger-sized, more manageable pieces. Then it's always easier to cut on a flat surface, so I'm going to tip my carrot up like this and just cut down pieces that are about 1 centimeter wide. From here, it's a lot easier for me to just break it down into pieces now. Then I can just hold my carrot and dice it easily. This looks like about 1.5 cups of carrots here, so I think I'll just use this one carrot. Next, I'm going to cut my onions. For the onions, I'll cut them from the root to the tip in half, and then I'm going to cut off the top of both of my pieces of onions. From here, it's easy for me to just peel back the skin. The onions have natural lines that go from the root to the tip, so I'm going to follow those lines. And at intervals of about 1 centimeter, I'm just going to make incisions that go almost to the root. I need to keep the root intact. And now I'll turn my onion and I'm just going to dice it. When I get to the root, I can just keep turning and go around the root. So I use every last bit of that onion. A trick I like to do sometimes if you're cutting onions and it's really bugging you, just flip your cutting board over, and that will put the onion juices away for a couple of minutes. The next ingredient that I'm going to prepare are my mushrooms here. So I'm not going to use the stems of the mushrooms because they're a little bit woodier. So I'll start by just going and removing all the stems to put them into our compost bowl here. To prepare our mushrooms, I'm going to dice them, like I said, so that they're a similar size to our carrots or celery and our onions. So I'll just put it with the flat side down, and I'm just going to hold it and cut it into kind of 3 pieces here and turn it so everything's together, and then dice them again. So I have nice 1 centimeter pieces. If it's easier for you, you can certainly just slice the mushrooms. They'll just be a little bit larger in your soup, and I, to be honest, am not the biggest fan of big chunks of mushrooms, so I like to dice them nice and small, so we'll do that. I'm going to prepare my garlic now. So I have some beautiful local garlic here. It has so much nice sharp flavor. To remove the peel, I'm just going to take the base of my knife and firmly press down. Then I can easily get rid of the skin of that garlic. I like to prepare the garlic with a microplane because this way I can just grate it very finely. I'll just hold it with the root end in my fingertips and just go very quickly back and forth, just being careful not to grate my fingers. And you can see it makes it a really nice and fine garlic grate. The last thing that I need to prepare are my herbs. I have here a mixture of some fresh thyme and parsley, and I'll start by just taking the thyme and removing the leaves from the stems, and I can put the stems just into my compost pile. I pretty much have all the makings here of a good vegetable stock to start. I'll gather up my thyme here. If there's a little bit of stems left in it, that's okay. I'm just going to give it a rough chop to chop up any stems and just to chop those leaves a little bit here. If you also don't have any fresh herbs on hand, it's completely acceptable just to substitute for dried herbs. Dried herbs can be a little bit more potent, so just decrease the amount that you're using. I'm going to remove the leaves of my parsley and put my stems aside, and then I'll chop this up as well. So when I chop my parsley, I'll gather it all up in a little bundle here, and I'm just going to hold my chef's knife and chop through it. Just being very careful to avoid my fingertips. And then I like to gather it up, turn it and gather it up again, and just chop through it the other way one more time. For younger chefs who are helping out, a really great way to chop herbs is with scissors. Other herbs that I think would work well in this soup are sage or rosemary. We have all of our ingredients prepared for our soup, so let's get cooking it. My chicken is cooked. It's been poaching for about 25 minutes, so using some tongs, I'm just going to take it on a plate and just let it cool down. From here, I'm just going to dice the chicken up so I can put it back into my soup afterwards. I need this pot for cooking our vegetables, so I'm just going to set the stock into a different container and then wash out the pot quickly so we can cook the rest of our vegetables in here. Whenever I'm cooking a soup, I need to think about what order I'll add the ingredients in, for which will take the longest to which will take the least long to cook. So I'll start by adding in my oil. And before I add any of the ingredients in, I want the oil to heat up a little bit. When oil has heated up, you'll notice that it will just start to shimmer slightly. So I'll wait for that cue before I add my first ingredient. The first ingredient that I'm going to add are the onions because they will take the longest. There's nothing as bad as raw onions in a soup, so we want to really make sure that they start to break down before we add anything else. I can see a little bit of a shimmer in my oil, so I'll add the onions and you should hear a nice sizzle. Beautiful. That's the sound of a nice hot pan. So I'm just going to stir the onions every 30 seconds or so, just to make sure that they're not sticking to the bottom of the pan and not burning. I'll start by just seasoning the onions with a little bit of salt as well. It's good to season in layers when you're cooking so that you have a lot more depth of flavor. So if I start out by seasoning with salt, I won't go crazy because I'm going to need to add some at the end. But this is just going to help to also break down those onions. My onions have changed color. It's been about 3 or 4 minutes. They're looking a little bit more translucent. So I'm now going to add my carrots. And just continuing to stir every once in a while. I'll cook these for another few minutes. All right, our carrots have been in there for about 3 minutes. I'll add in our celery next. Our celery has cooked enough. I can see it has actually brightened and become more green. I'm gonna add in now our mushrooms. When you add mushrooms, they tend to soak up a lot of the oil. I'll also add our garlic at the same time. And I'll season it a bit more with some salt, and now I'll add some pepper too. I'm going to cook this for about 2 more minutes. I just want the mushrooms to soften a little bit, and the garlic should become really nice and fragrant. You'll smell it. We just don't want to cook it too long because we do not want the garlic to burn and to impart bitter flavors. I can add in my herbs now as well. And I'm going to throw in this bay leaf. Everything looks really beautiful in this soup now. So I'm going to add in my stock, and it'll just deglaze the bottom of the pan. And that means it'll just get any little burny bits that were stuck there and release them. I'll just give a little stir to make sure any little bits come up off the bottom there. So now I'm just going to let this simmer for about 20 minutes. I'm going to add in my wild rice, and I'll push this to the side, and then in the meantime I'm going to chop up my chicken and put that in the soup as well. So I'm going to dice up our chicken breast here. It's cooled down, so it's a lot easier for me to handle. I'll just slice through it and then turn it with the flat side down and cut it into long strips. And just turn it again, and I can dice it very easily. Another thing that you can do if you'd like is you can use a whole chicken or you can use chicken legs. What you would just do for that is that you would poach the chicken just as we did in the beginning, and then you'd remove the chicken from the pot and let it cool, and then you just need to shred the chicken and make sure that any bones and cartilage are disposed of. So I have our diced chicken, and I'm just going to add that into our pot to cook with everything else. I want this to come to a very low boil, and then I'll turn it down to a simmer. And in about 20 minutes, I'll check it to see how my rice is cooked. To make our soup very nice and creamy, we're going to make a bechamel sauce. A bechamel is a classical French sauce that consists of butter, which is thickened with a roux, which is flour. So the first step I need to do is just melt all of my butter into my pan here. And once it's melted, I'm going to whisk in all of the flour. So bechamel can be the base of a lot of other delicious classical French sauces, such as a mornay, where you fold cheese into it. But this is just going to act as a thickener to make our soup very nice and creamy. My butter is completely melted, so I'm just going to whisk in all of the flour here, stirring constantly so I don't develop any lumps. And I'm just going to continue to cook this flour for about a minute, just so that it gets rid of kind of that raw flour taste, and the roux will darken a little bit. I'll just adjust my heat to turn it down just a tiny bit there. You can see it's a really nice thick mixture. What's going to happen is as soon as I add in my liquid here, so in this case my milk, it is going to immediately thicken the milk into a nice sauce. All right, so with my milk, I'm going to add in about 1/3 of it. And now I'm just going to let this kind of come back to a boil. And you can see right now it kind of looks a little bit grainy. Once it comes to a boil, it will look really nice and thick and smooth. And then I'm going to add in some more milk. I like to do it in a couple additions like this, just so that it's really nice and smooth. So almost immediately as it's heating up, you can see with my whisk here, it's thickening. This is a very nice and thick bechamel. So now that I see that it's activated here, I'm going to add in another 1/3 of my milk. And I'll just whisk it gently together. While I'm waiting for it to come to a boil, I'll season it with a good pinch of salt here and just a little bit of black pepper. So my last addition of milk will go in here as it's nice and thick. And then this just needs to come back up to a gentle boil. And everything will be nice and thick. From here, I'm just going to pour the bechamel sauce into my soup, which will in turn make it nice and thick and creamy also. Here we are. The bechamel is just bubbling slightly, and now you can see it's really nice and thick. So I'll let this cook for about 2 minutes, then I'll take it off the heat and I will fold it into our soup. Our chicken and wild rice soup is finished. It's so beautiful and thick and creamy. I'm just gonna give it one final taste. A good sign that the rice is finished is it will kind of split a little bit, but I'm gonna taste it to make sure that the rice is fully cooked and it doesn't need any additional seasoning. That's beautiful. The rice has just like a little bit of a crunch to it. I'm gonna adjust with just a little bit more salt and just a touch of pepper, just for a little bit more sharpness to contrast that delicious creaminess. Whenever you adjust your seasoning, you want to make sure you stir it fully, and then I'll taste it one more time here. Oh, it's perfect. So this soup makes quite a bit. If you wanted to at home, you could certainly have the recipe, or the soup also freezes very well. But trust me, this soup is just so delicious. I don't think having a lot of it will be a problem.